Welcome to another episode of Wheel of Horror, the podcast where two best friends spin a wheel once a week. It chooses the horror movie and they discuss it. Today we're talking about 1992's Candyman, which was directed by Bernard Rose. I am your co-host Alec.
This is Joe.
Dude, this was such a good movie. Oh my god, I hadn't seen it in probably 10 years, and I was so pleasantly surprised by everything, honestly. So I'm just starting off on a very positive foot here. Just wanted to say.
Well, I'll join you because I couldn't agree more. I probably haven't seen this movie in maybe 20 years. Like, it has been a while. Yeah, and, you know, I mentioned in our last episode, I actually saw this movie in theaters.
That's so crazy, dude. Who took you to that one?
Oh, I went with my grandfather.
Good.
You know, I mean, I mention this all the time. We went to movies constantly, and if there was a horror movie out, I always pushed for that. And yeah, we saw this. I remember liking it. I remember being, you know, not scarred by it, but a little freaked out by it. Like, this is probably scarier than a lot of things I had seen at that point, you know, and bought the VHS tape when that came out. And I also dragged him to see Candyman 2, Farewell to the Flesh, a few years later.
Now that's just cruel, Joe. That's on you.
Yeah, no, he was a good man and he didn't deserve that.
Yeah, I've never seen the sequels. I've watched like YouTube explainers on them, and I'm like, I'm good. Even the guy doing the videos is like, these movies are trash.
Yeah, I haven't seen part 2 probably in just as long, 20 plus years. And part 3, I remember catching just a bit on TV and watching enough to realize that they didn't bring back the Philip Glass score, which I hope we're going to talk about a little bit.
Oh, God, yeah.
And once I realized that, I was out.
Yeah, dude. I mean, Tony Todd, obviously, like, it's so cool that he reprised his role. Mm-hmm. But I don't believe that Virginia Madsen's character comes back in the sequels. That's kind of weird. Because, like, the whole point of the movie is getting her to, like, be this urban legend woman, I guess.
Yes, and again, I haven't seen the second one in so long, but I think they retcon it a bit. Because the second one, they get into his backstory, and it takes place in New Orleans, I believe. And this movie takes place in Chicago. So, again, I haven't seen that movie in so long, but I feel like they did some retconning.
Damn, that's stupid. This was such like a good movie. I don't know. I guess before we jump into this a little bit, I just want to know, like, what's your relationship with Clive Barker and his kind of world a bit? I love live events, but I hate buying tickets. The hidden fees suck, and coordinating with friends is a nightmare. I always end up fronting a bunch of money and then chasing down my friends to get reimbursed. And if they flake, I'm stuck with the whole bill. But then I discovered Fanimal. Fanimal has tickets to everything, and there are no fees. The price you see is the price you pay. Not only are the prices transparent, but they're almost always lower than anywhere else I look. And for any hot tickets, like Lollapalooza, or a Dodgers game, or a weekend concert, Fanimal is always the cheapest option. Nobody goes to live events alone, so why buy tickets alone? Fanimal's patented group purchase makes it easy. First, you set a minimum size for your group, and choose the number of tickets you want to pay for yourself. Then you invite friends. When the minimum size is met, everyone gets charged and receives their tickets. If the minimum size isn't reached in time, nobody gets charged. You don't commit until your friends do. And Fanimal has amazing customer service. Check out their hundreds of 5-star reviews. The next time you need tickets, go to Fanimal.com or download the Fanimal app and sign up with code HORROR for $20 of credit towards your first purchase. Check out Fanimal and experience more.
Yeah, you know, I saw most of the Hellraiser. I dragged my poor grandfather to see Hellraiser 4 Bloodlines in theaters.
Right.
and I had seen the first 3 Hellraisers before that and enjoyed them, but they were never my favorites. I think they were just, I don't think I could appreciate them at that age, and I actually appreciate them more now. And yeah, I mean, I think we'll get into it as we go, but Candyman reminds me a lot of Hellraiser in different ways. And yeah, I think I just I always respected those movies, but I think they were just maybe too dark and too maybe out there for me. They weren't movies that me and my friends constantly rewatched, you know, because they were just no fun.
Yeah, his movies, it's almost like the character is bigger than the movie. that like Candyman seems like too cool of a character. Pinhead always seemed like too cool of a character to be in Hellraiser. But you're right though, this movie, not even just the dialogue, and like obviously it's created by the same guy, not directed, not written by Clive Barker, but the influence or whatever the book was. But the way it was shot just really reminded me of Hellraiser. It looked like everything was kind of like wet almost, or just like it had the same look to it. And the music helps too. The music by Philip Glass didn't do Hellraiser, but the music's similar, almost this like religious experience when you're listening to both of them.
Yeah, I could see that. And I feel like every word that comes out of Candyman's mouth could be coming out of Pinhead's mouth. You know,
Right.
they speak in this very like romantic, poetic, dark, language. And it's just, it brought me right back to Hellraiser. But, Clive Barker, I just think he's such a fascinating guy. Sometimes I just go on YouTube and watch interviews with him. And if you've ever seen any of his paintings, they're just beautiful and terrifying. Yeah, I also actually saw in theaters Lord of Illusions. He's only done a handful of movies,
Right.
but I have seen most of them. I never saw Nightbreed.
Oh, that was the only one I was going to ask you. I have seen that one. So I was
Oh,
gonna be
really?
like, ooh, you ever seen Nightbreed? Really good makeup in that one.
All right. Well, yeah, that is one I should track down.
Yeah, I mean, his name is so synonymous with horror, but it's weird because it's not like it's not like John Carpenter, or Wes Craven. Like, they usually, if not obviously always direct, but they have their own. I don't know. I guess Clive Barker's own style too. I don't even know what I'm talking about.
It's almost like Stephen King, like
Yeah. Yes.
there's good ones, there's not so good ones, but someone takes that germ of an idea and runs with it. Sometimes it's great, sometimes not so much.
Well, the one thing I do love, though, is that they change the names of his books. Because the name is, like, Forbidden Love. That was, like, Candyman's book or whatever. And then Hellraiser's, like, The Heartfelt Something. Or
The
like,
Hellbound Heart.
There you go.
Yes, I've actually never read any Clive Barker, but I just bought The Hellbound Heart, and I'm saving it for the fall.
Ooh.
I think it's about time I crack open some Clive Barker. So I'll let you know what I think.
I bet they're even more graphic than the movies, but like it's just interesting to me that like somebody's like, this can't be a horror movie. This sounds like a romantic, like a romance novel or something. Like you need to make a Hellraiser, like Candyman, like this creepy thing.
Yeah, I mean, well, when you think about like Hellraiser, the first movie, so much of that movie is about the relationships between Julia and her husband and Frank, the guy she's having an affair with. Like, I think that might be one of the things that kind of turned me off as a kid. Like, I'm like, when are we going to get to Pinhead and the Cenobites,
Right.
But a lot of it is about these adult relationships, and Candyman has a very romantic side too that we're going to get into, I'm sure.
Yeah. So let's jump into the movie. Yeah. So Candyman, basically just like a little plot overview here. It's about Virginia Madsen is either a grad student or I'm not sure what she is. I don't think she's in college.
I think she's a grad student.
Yeah, and her husband works at the school, and it's in Chicago. And they're doing a thesis on like urban legends or kind of ghost stories that have some sort of realism to them. And they're doing an investigation into this one called Candyman. And they slowly start to learn about his plot. And then we go into the plot with Virginia Madsen. And we meet Candyman. And we slowly learn about his whole thing. It's a cool idea. You don't see a lot of movies like this, I guess, like an investigation thing that becomes real and then it ends up being that the person doing the investigation actually is part of this folklore.
Yeah. I mean, I remember like when this movie was released, the poster and I think the VHS box, it said the scariest movie since Silence of the Lambs. And it's funny, like Candyman always gets kind of lumped in with Freddy and Jason and the other slasher movies. But to tell you the truth, rewatching this, I was thinking it probably has more in common in tone with Silence of the Lambs. Like the first 40 minutes of this movie is like this mystery, this kind of investigation,
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we don't even see Candyman for 40 minutes, and this is only like an hour and a half movie. I mean, this movie has a lot of patience and yeah, I was really kind of pulled into the mystery right away.
I think I was almost more intrigued before they met Candyman because I was more like they're telling all these like stories about him. People's hair turns white when they see him, and I'm like, oh, like it's the building of like when we're gonna meet this guy. Really, it does work.
Oh, okay. So I think, as much as I love Tony Todd in this movie and I love the Candyman scenes, I feel like the first half is the stronger half.
Yeah, me too.
Because, yeah, like you said, we hear these stories, people, telling these urban legends about Candyman. And, they always say in movies that you need to show, don't tell, That's
Hmm.
something people always say. But I think this movie is a great example of like, tell, don't show, because like my mind is filling in the blanks that they're not showing. And I feel like it's even scarier than if I saw it.
Yeah, dude, because yeah, you're hearing all these different accounts of the same kind of stories, and you're like, yeah, you're building it up in your head, and it's not like for Nightmare on Elm Street where it's like within 2 seconds you basically meet Freddy right as the
Mhm.
movie's starting. This movie's like, ooh, when are we gonna meet this guy? Is he even real?
Mhm.
Because we think once we meet the gang or whatever, and that one like real person who hits her in the head or whatever, and he goes to jail, you're like, oh, like that kind of is it. And then no, 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 real Candyman's here now.
Yeah, it's almost like, is this going to be a supernatural movie? Is this going to be just a conventional kind of serial killer movie? You're not really
Yeah.
sure. And, I like where the movie goes, but it goes to a more surreal place where I'm not totally sure what's going on all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, the first half especially really sucked me in. Could I go back a bit to the beginning?
Please, yeah.
Like, I mean, right from the get go, we get the amazing haunting Philip Glass score and
Mm.
this awesome tracking shot over Chicago. We see bees and this voiceover from Candyman. I feel like right from the get go, this movie has me like uneasy.
Mm.
It's like the way the scenes transition. Then we get one of these urban legends. The way these scenes transition, it just keeps me on edge. It's hard to describe. It's like if you watch The Exorcist, like there's like a scene that's very noisy and then very quiet and then very noisy and so on. I feel like there's similar things going on in this. I don't know. I just noticed that, the way the scenes transition, it just kept me really on edge the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, the jump scares, there's not like a lot of music that like builds up. Like
Mhm.
specifically the one I'm thinking of is like when Candyman like busts through the mirror and attacks Virginia Madsen for
Mhm.
pretty much the first time, I think. That was so out of nowhere. Like
Yeah.
I was not expecting that. And then the dog jumping up, the Rottweiler, that actually scared me because I mean, there's a jump scare, but there's nothing to make you believe that's going to happen.
Yeah. And yeah, it has some good jump scares, but I feel like this movie is scary in unconventional ways and probably in ways that I'm not going to be great at articulating. It's just this mood, this tone, and yeah, these flashbacks. I mean, the one that really got me was the little kid in the public restroom.
Just what, walking in there or getting murdered?
I mean, I feel like that's maybe the most disturbing scene in the movie.
That is, but I also gotta say, like when the dog's head is cut off and the blood is all on the crib, and you're like, is the baby dead too? Like that got me for a second.
Yeah, no, no, fair enough. I mean, yeah, that's when the movie just kind of gets really bonkers. It almost reminds me of like a David Lynch movie from here on in, where
Yes.
it's like I don't even know if you're supposed to be understanding what's going on. You're just kind of, it's just like a dream. You're just going with it.
Well, you said you couldn't really pinpoint what made it scary, and to me, the thing that really made it scary was like we know as the audience that she's not crazy
Hmm.
because we're seeing all this, obviously all the Candyman stuff, but everybody else, Candyman's turning her into the murderer. So it's like that's what's so scary is you don't have any control over what people are seeing or thinking, but you know the truth. So you
Hmm.
start to question your own sanity.
Yeah, and I guess that is something that Candyman has done over time. It's implied at the end. It's going to kind of start all over again with the professor's girlfriend. And I'm assuming the scene at the beginning, the boyfriend probably got blamed. Oh, by the way, that's a Ted Raimi cameo, Sam Raimi's brother.
He looked familiar. I couldn't
Yeah.
figure out who he was. Okay.
Yep. He was the witch in Evil Dead 2.
Henrietta or whatever, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I thought that was interesting. It's something I kind of forgot about this movie, that essentially Candyman kind of frames her.
Yeah.
Also, something interesting that I remembered when I saw this as a kid is I was familiar with some of these urban legends. Like, it seems like they plucked different things from different urban legends to make this Candyman legend. Like, I mean, do you know, like, Bloody Mary?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, like, even when I first saw this, I remember thinking that, oh, this is like Bloody Mary. And even the Hook killer that we talked about in I Know What You Did Last Summer took inspiration from. That comes from an urban legend. So I feel like they're taking little things from different stories and combining them for Candyman.
Well, on the urban legend point, again, I didn't really notice this either, but it kind of reminded me of Freddy vs. Jason a little bit, with Freddy needing to keep like his legend alive. Essentially, people
Mm,
need to remember him. So Candyman, he's like, I have to shed innocence for people to like know who I am. Because I'm like, why is he killing little kids and like
right.
all like, and also why is he killing black people?
Yeah, I was wondering the exact same thing, and I was actually really trying to pay attention to what he was saying,
Yeah.
in that second half of the movie because I'm not totally sure I get an answer to a lot of the questions I have.
I took something away from this viewing, basically knowing that like, okay, so Candyman needs to keep his legend going, and that's kind of why he's framing people. And then the reason he doesn't immediately kill Virginia Madsen's character is because she's the reincarnation of his ex-lover, which caused his death. Is that
Hmm.
basically what it's supposed to be? Do you think that's accurate though, or do you think that's him just kind of fucking with her? This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Bard's Clothing. The days of Hi, my name is are over. We live in a virtual world, and our images are being shared on social media and professional pages every day. With over 1,000 fabrics to choose from, Bard's Clothing is here to tell your story through clothing. Make sure the image you want people to have of you is the one you're sending, because by the time you get face to face, their minds might already be made up. Quality clothing all made here in America. Head on over to www.bardsclothing.com or follow them on Instagram at bardsclothing.
Well, I think their love is genuine. Are you saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that is legit,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like yeah, he just wants to kind of spend eternity with her.
I think you're right.
Hmm.
Just because I was thinking from the other side of it, like, okay, maybe he's just trying to break her down. He's already removed her husband, her job. I mean, everything's fallen apart. Like, why not trick her even further? But then the first time she sees him in the parking garage, she starts crying. And
Hmm.
I'm like, huh. I feel like it's this, like, primal thing inside of her, like a subconscious thing that's remembering her lost lover. And then he cries at the end, too.
Yeah,
So you're like,
yeah,
wow. Okay, so I think they are long lost lovers, basically.
right. Yeah. I had totally forgotten about all of this, and it actually reminds me of one of my favorite horror movies that came out the same year. Bram Stoker's Dracula has a
Right.
very similar kind of subplot going on,
Right.
and
Yeah.
honestly, Candyman is probably more of like a universal monster than he is like a slasher movie or a slasher villain, because he's much more kind of like sexy and sympathetic, than someone like Jason or Michael Myers.
Right, because you look at, or even Freddy Krueger, because you're like, well, yeah, he like molested children or was a child like kidnapper or whatever. Like, good that he got burnt alive. This
Hmm.
guy didn't do anything wrong. He's just a product of horrible racism in the times, and
Hmm.
that's why he got killed, not because he genuinely did anything wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, you are sympathetic to him, but you want him to fuck up like rich white people. Like, you don't want him to go for like disenfranchised black people. Like, ah,
Like I'm sure that there have been fascinating papers written about this movie, and
yeah.
I almost want to watch it again and maybe approach it from that angle. But maybe he's kind of hunting in that area because he knows nobody will care.
Mm.
Like that's just coming to me now. But yeah, that's the best I could come up with.
I mean, that makes sense because they do say a few lines in the movie where it's like,
Hmm.
one white woman gets hurt and they shut the whole place down. A little black boy gets killed and nothing happens. It's like, oh,
Right.
okay. So,
Right.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it does seem like these awful things happen in this neighborhood, and it's like whatever. I mean, they actually shot this in the projects in Chicago, and you could tell, there's some really incredible shots of Cabrini Green, I think it's called, and the
Yeah.
skyline of Chicago in the background. I mean, I'm really, really impressed with this movie because it was a relatively low budget movie, but I mean, these amazing like helicopter shots, and I'm sure it wasn't easy closing down the projects and making it safe for a film crew. So just really impressed with this movie.
Yeah, I heard a little bit of behind the scenes stuff that those guys in the beginning that harass the two women, those were not actors. Those are people that live there,
Oh,
and they
yeah.
dubbed in their lines
Hmm.
apparently
Oh,
because they, didn't say what they wanted them to. But yeah, so that was pretty crazy. They also said that they found a bullet in one of their generators. So somebody had shot one of the generators and a car during the
mhm.
shooting. So during the filming. So it's like, damn. So yeah, that is crazy that they actually did film there. That's
Mhm.
nuts.
Yeah. I mean, I know that the Clive Barker story takes place in Liverpool, I think.
Yes, that's right.
And it was this director's idea to, make it an American story and make it, I think Barker's story kind of dealt with class issues in England. And this director, wanted to make it American and have it deal more with race issues.
Yeah. And really quick, I don't want to stay on this too long, but it is a little strange too that you would have this story that takes place in America. It's about race and takes place in the projects in Chicago, and Candyman's an African American, and it's not directed by an African American. It's a little weird.
Yeah, I doubt that would have even crossed many people's minds back then.
Where was Spike Lee? Spike Lee could have done it.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess from what I understand, there was just this kind of like chance meeting between the director and Clive Barker, and they, for whatever reason, this director had his eye on this story and made a deal with Barker.
I mean, I'm not, taking away from it at all because it is great either
Mhm.
way.
Yeah, that decision probably wouldn't be made today, and as we know, there was just a remake of this movie, which I haven't seen.
Me neither.
And I plan on seeing it. And I actually saw that it's currently streaming on Amazon. And you gave me the choice to either review that one or review this one. And when I saw that one was streaming, I almost said, you know what? Why don't we just do the new one? But then I hadn't seen this one in so long, and I would have wanted to compare the two. But long story short, I'm very glad we stuck with this one.
No, me too. I went through like a Clive Barker phase in college when I was studying abroad in London, just because I was taking this film class and this teacher just never stopped talking about him. So I was like, I'll watch Candyman and a few Hellraisers, blah blah blah. But yeah, same as you. I didn't enjoy it very much when I was in my early 20s, but seeing it again, seeing Hellraiser as I get older, I really like them more when I pay attention to the dialogue and I don't sit there just like you waiting for more Pinhead, waiting for more slasher from Candyman. Oh, yeah, sorry, really quick. Last thing I'm going to mention about this, and I promise I'm done. Apparently, the scene at the end when Virginia Madsen and Tony Todd are like swinging with each other and they're holding each other, there was a kiss scene there. And it
Mm,
was like supposed to show like, okay, they're really in love, like sort of, or like whatever there was, but there was a kiss. And the studio removed it because they didn't want to have a interracial kiss in the film.
wow.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's funny to see some of the things that happen in this movie, but that's the controversial thing.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Of everything else. But it's crazy to think, like, dude, this came out 30 years ago. And you think I'm
Mhm.
talking about a movie from the 60s when I say something like that. So it's just kind
Right.
of, I don't know, it was jarring when Tony Todd talked about it in an interview. I was like, come on,
Hmm.
really?
Yeah, that's crazy. But they do have some kind of, I don't know if it's a kiss, but there is this incredible scene and done practically where Tony Todd has live bees in his mouth,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they kind of have some kind of kiss, and she has bees all over her face. From what I understand, this was obviously not very fun to film, and Tony Todd had some kind of deal that he got an extra $1,000 every time he was stung, and apparently I think he got an extra $23,000 on top of his salary just from being stung by bees.
Wow. I heard he got stung up to 20 times. I did not know about that $1,000 per sting. That's pretty
Yeah,
good.
I mean, hopefully it's true, and I mean he deserves it.
Well, did you know that Virginia Madsen is actually allergic to bees?
Indeed. In the same article I read about Tony Todd's bonus, I heard that, and that is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like you're taking your life into your own hands.
I mean, apparently the bees they used were under 24 hours old, and those
Mm,
they typically don't have fully developed stingers, or they don't even know how to use them. So there was that, and apparently the one of the people on set used queen bee pheromone and would rub it on himself and the actor so they wouldn't attack or something like that. So a lot of things, and also they had a lot of EpiPens like on set ready to go. But still,
yeah.
I'm sorry, like
I
that's
mean,
crazy. And Tony Todd had him in his freaking mouth, dude.
that scene, it's just one of those scenes in movies where I'm just like, I'm so glad that this was made at a certain time because if this was made today, I mean, I don't know what's in the remake, but
Mm,
likely this would all be CGI, you know?
I know.
And you can tell it's not. You can tell like, holy shit, that guy has a mouthful of bees right now.
Right. And that adds so much to it. I mean, granted, that first opening scene with the bees going all over Chicago in the background, I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, that looked bad. But the real bees in the mouth look great.
Mhm.
And that reminded me of a David Lynch thing, too, when they were zooming in on the bees, getting really close. David Lynch loves doing, like, extreme zoom ins on, like, bugs and just, like, grass and stuff. So
Mhm.
that reminded me of that. You know, I had a question for you, though. And you might just say like I had stream logic or whatever because
Mhm.
it doesn't really make sense. But what are the rules with Candyman and Virginia Madsen? Because it seems like every time that she's near a mirror, he can come out, or if she says his name or whatever, he can come out. But when she's tied up and like locked up or whatever for a month, he doesn't attack. He doesn't do anything. So it's like, why? Why? And then the other thing is, what is he taking care of that baby for a month? He's changing the diapers. He's feeding it. Like, what the fuck?
Mhm. Yeah. I don't think I have any satisfactory answers for you. Yeah, that is part of the reason I feel like the first half of the movie is stronger. I feel like I'm just kind of a little bit lost, but kind of in a good way, like sometimes a movie that where I'm asking myself these questions, I can feel very frustrated. I don't really feel that way with this movie. It's almost like something like The Shining, where I'm a little bit confused. I have questions. I don't quite know what's going on, but I'm along for the ride. I'm enjoying it anyway. I kind of feel that way with this. So yeah, I don't think I can answer those questions for you. Sorry.
No, it's fine because I think of other movies like Let's Scare Jessica to Death, for example, where the audience really doesn't know if she's crazy or if this is supernatural. This movie, we do know for a fact that this is actually happening to her because Henrietta, when she gets murdered, she reacts
Mhm.
to, or Bernadette or whatever her friend's name is. She
Yeah.
reacts when she sees him in the apartment. So we see that like clearly this is happening.
hmm And I'm actually glad that they don't take that. I could imagine the remake doing something like that. I feel like that's a very modern horror trope. It was your PTSD manifesting, or yeah,
Right.
the monster isn't real. It was all in your head. I could imagine them doing something like that with this movie, and I'm grateful they don't. You mentioned when her friend gets killed, and actually reminds me of a couple of scenes in this movie, which I think are interesting choices. Like when we first see Candyman, it's in broad daylight. And same when her friend gets killed. I think it's in broad daylight, or at least it's in a very
Mm.
well lit apartment. And I think that's just such an interesting choice. Like when they're in that parking garage and it's daylight, you don't think anything's gonna happen. I feel like in a horror movie it would be dark and it would just have a different feel. But I saw that the director wanted to get away from certain horror cliches, like he thought that there were too much screaming in horror movies, and that's why Virginia Madsen
Mm.
usually falls under this kind of hypnosis when she's around him. He didn't want her screaming the whole time like a lot of
Right.
women in horror movies. And I wouldn't be surprised if he was just like, let's just shoot this in the day, let's have it just really well lit. And, there's something really creepy about that. Like when she's running down her hallway and he's just at the end of it and it's not dark. It's very like almost clinical.
Yeah, I mean you're right because she doesn't scream when she sees him. I will push back a little bit though and say that like the way the movie ends is a girl screaming when she finds the husband dead or whatever, whatever, whatever.
Well, no, I actually want to. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah,
I remembered that. I remembered that from when I had seen it when I was young, and I my memory of it was a little lame. The ending, that she
yeah, yeah,
essentially was the new Candyman. It kind of, I just remember it feeling like this was like a studio note or something. Like we need to have some kind of scare at the
mm,
end, and it not really working for me. But I don't know. Coming back to it now, it does seem like they're setting her up to be his partner, So I'll say I didn't hate
yeah.
it.
I think they should have had Tony Todd in the scene though.
Mm,
Like he should have been maybe had his hand on her shoulder or something like that,
mhm.
just to be like they're together. Because otherwise, it's like, yeah, she like did she replace him? Like what is
Right,
this?
right.
But she looks like a Cenobite too. I always thought she.
Yeah. That is interesting. Like the whole bit in the bonfire, like they want to give her some kind of victory over him, but all that
Right.
really happens is she stabs him with a piece of wood. And I would have
Yeah.
liked a more spectacular vanquishing for Candyman.
Yeah, dude, that's super lame. And I forgot that she died, but I was like, if she doesn't die in this, I'm gonna be like actually mad because she is like on fire. But you're
Mhm,
right, she needed to get that like redemption with that community to show like, hey, I didn't do this. Like I am a good person.
mhm.
And they'll never know about Candyman, but I don't know. And I guess he doesn't die, so I don't know. The baby lives though. That's good.
I give the movie credit for getting that dark, though. Having her not only die but like burn to death. I mean, she's the lead of the movie.
Yeah.
Usually, the final girl lives, but I feel like that's kind of a bold choice.
Yeah, I liked it. I appreciated
Mhm.
that they did that because otherwise it's like okay, so she's like a burn victim now, and she gets her story published. Like okay, that's fine. But the ending, I did want to see if you noticed this when the whole Cabrini Green community comes and they throw Candyman's hook in there. The little boy looks like he's like Candyman.
Hmm.
He's wearing like a coat like Candyman. So I was like, well, what's that about? But are they like giving her a weapon because they know that she's gonna be like the next Candyman? Like, why do you think they show up? Like, I know it's to show respect, but is it like to pass the torch in a way?
Yeah, interesting. I was thinking about that moment. Or just to kind of bury that with her,
Yeah.
just hoping the evil is finally vanquished. But I don't know. I think you could look at it a few different ways.
Yeah, you're right. It's very David Lynchian, especially the second half. There's a lot to dissect, a lot you have to kind of fill in, but overall, I really enjoyed this. I am definitely gonna watch the Candyman 2021, which is doing what Scream and Halloween and all of these movies are doing now, and just it's a sequel, but kind of not.
Yeah. I mean, this was a lot of fun. I don't know what took me so long to come back to Candyman, but I'm so glad I did. And honestly, I'd say I think this is one of the best horror movies of the '90s.
Yeah, especially pre-Scream too. And it didn't feel like a 90s movie. It honestly felt more like an 80s movie. Probably because of the smoking, like how
Oh
casual it
man,
was like everywhere.
this movie is a smoking commercial.
Dude, like holy shit. You're like Virginia, like you're not going to look so good if you keep smoking. But
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that makes me feel, it's kind of, I don't know, when I think '80s, I think of horror movies with a really strong sense of humor. And this movie is like stone serious. I mean, I
mhm.
don't think there is a single moment of like comic relief in this whole movie, and that's fine with me. I would have it no other way. But yeah, I don't know. Like I really do feel like it fits in nicely with some of these early '90s movies like Silence of the Lambs or Misery.
Yeah, you're right. Well, Joe, you got any last minute thoughts on Candyman before we wrap up here today?
I'm probably gonna check out that remake too, and maybe I'll go crazy and watch Candyman Farewell to the Flesh again, just for old time's sake.
If you do, let me know. I mean, honestly, if we both watch the remake in the near future and we like it, we should just do a bonus episode because, like, it'll be fresh in our minds, this one and the new one. So,
Yeah, I'm down.
All right, cool. Well, what do you say we spin the wheel?
Let's do it.
Alrighty. Ooh, okay. So we got Salem's Lot from 1979.
Ah, very nice. Okay.
Yeah. Actually, something really cool. I don't know if you've ever listened to any of the episodes with Dom Berger, but he actually reads all of the Stephen King books before he does. He's going to be the guest for this one, so he'll watch the movie, but he also reads the book beforehand, so he helps us with the comparison. So that'll be kind of cool.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, very nice.
All right, cool. Well, everybody, thank you very much for listening into our discussion on Candyman today. If you haven't had a chance yet, we covered The Gray Man on Friday, and we will be back next week with Salem's Lot. There we go. All right, cool. Thanks, guys. Have a great week.